So I wanted to talk about kind of war meta and how it shifted. I think the easiest way to look at this first is probably just to look at a sample war roster. This is not up to date. This is like a 2 week old roster, but it still gets the same idea across. The main things that we've seen in terms of like the last 2 to 3 months is a decrease in the amount of not quad necessarily, but bruiser groups. A decrease in the amount of ranged builds overall, like bow, musket, etc. Increase in the amount of disruptors, mostly because spear is super strong, and a decrease in the amount of IGVGs because IGVG is really good for destroying clumps, and clump destroying in general feels weak right now. And that has kind of dictated how the meta has evolved for the most part. Uh, for the most part, how the meta works right now is kind of three stages for between going first or going second. If you are going first, which means that you're the one initiating a clump, usually you have a bait, which is like a soft clump. Then two, they crash you, so you need to declump because usually they'll crash after you bait, and then three, you need to actually clump and nuke it. So there's a kind of a three-step process there, and you need to be able to execute that really well if you're going first, and that's a little bit harder to do usually than if you go second, which I'll draw on a different color at the bottom of the screen. And if you go second, all you have to do is your normal step is you just dog people down, or you dog pile on top of people, and you just basically surround each individual player with like 5 to 10 other players and make sure you force them out or they die. And then the second thing is then you clump when they actually hit you. Well, actually, no, there's usually a declump phase because when you're dogging, you're inherently clumped, which is like a bait, and then you declump, and then you clump. So it's pretty much the same thing. This whole bait step, the best way to bait is to dog people. So it's basically the same thing if you go first or go second at this point. You are looking to hit as many people as you are individually, because if you try to detonate into that first, the other people in that clump usually are going to be able to get out because of flails being used. Flail will help people declump very quickly because everyone has their cleanse and are able to get out, and because everyone has, in general, their cooldowns, but mostly because of flails. So people are just able to like get out of the clump really fast right now, and they're not able to do that much. So because of that, we've seen a general decrease in the amount of clump play that is meta right now, and you're seeing more circumstances where you have individuals going for certain targets. And what that means is we've basically gone from a meta where there were 4 to 6 disruptors, like maybe 2 to 3 months ago, to about 12, like 10 to 12 roughly. And that uptick has just resulted in a lot more pressure. A lot of builds are getting slotted to be oriented towards clump, but oriented towards pressure, and those pressure builds tend to be doing better. So like one example of that is this Firestaff Pest build that's in heavy. Firestaff Pest is basically not slotted anymore as a pure flamethrower build, is now being slotted as a light nuker. So your people are back to 400 int, 350 int, 150 con, or not 350 int. It's like 400 int to 450 int. It's like pretty common. And they'll do that with finisher because it'll help them live better and do more damage. So wait, the meta is shifting away from bruiser, running medium with great axe and hammer. It is for once. I would say great axe and hammer is still kind of needed, but it is definitely moving away from that. You see a lot more of people kind of going for more poke-oriented builds with the spear stuff. You see like light fire staff where people are just trying to blow people up. And in general, just pressure builds are being slotted. And what I mean by like pressure versus like clump value is like if you're an AoE disease bot, so like a classic AoE like disease bot build would be like BBVG, for example, like heavy BBVG. Like if you're just trying to spread your disease into a clump, and that was the build that you're playing, and you didn't have a lot of bursts, that build is basically dead right now because no one is able to execute kills on top of clumps. In a war, typically right now at a high level, you see about 70 to 90 kills a war. Like that's it. Like it's not that many kills. And because the kills are super low, like you have to keep in mind this is over 30 minutes. The best way to get tick is by forcing people off the point. And the best way to force people off the point is by running these super poke burst oriented builds that scare people enough to where they have to get off the point. you're not actually able to effectively go for healers in this meta. Basically, going for healers is almost always bait. If you try to go for a healer, you just get turned on by the 4 quad groups that are present. Every single spear looks in your direction, every single Firestaff looks in the direction, and you just get blown up through the heals. You're not able to live through the amount of burst that's being done, even though heals are relatively effective still. I'll be changing next patch a little bit too, because bile is getting better towards healers. I imagine more people will be running bile. If they're trying to blow people up, they can either lob the bile at the person that's taking a heal, or they could lob it at the healers themselves. But in general, healers have very, very low pressure too. Healers, I would say right now, are typically between 0 and 2 deaths a war. That's it. Like, it's not many. And if you're above that, it's either A, because you're inexperienced, or B, because you're being targeted, called out specifically, which is a little bit more common, but noteworthy distinction there. So that's like kind of the high level of like what's happened. In terms of like what this looks like in a macro perspective, that's not a great circle, is it? A little bit better of a circle, but still not a great circle. There are typically, I would say, about 6 groups on the point right now, about 3 groups on the left and 1 group on the right. The quad groups are typically on and off the point, but in the current meta, they're mostly on the point. Versus in past metas, if you were to look at this, on the point itself was like 2 people, and then you would have roughly 5 on the left and 3 on the right. So it was a little bit more balanced, but still favoring the side that's away from the bonfire. I'm imagining the bonfire here on the right, which I know is not red, but that's what it is. Potato circle? Yeah, it is a potato circle. But the idea is like very, very simple. Like, you just need to force people out, and by the trick with this meta is like, if you go second, you win, right? If you go second when you're going for a clump with this sort of roster, you typically win. So the way that you just do that is you have to bait, and the way to bait best is by creating a big clump, and the best way to get value while creating a big clump is to dog. So all these builds that are inherently just really poke-oriented, really burst-oriented builds. So like, you think of like, Spear is the one that stands out the most. Firestaff with Rapier instead of with Ice Gauntlet, it stands out a lot. Are just like builds that are just generally doing better in this meta, and then the builds that are doing worse are like Great Axe in general. Also, Warhammer is doing better in this meta, notably. Great Axe is doing worse. IGVG is doing a lot worse in this meta, to the point where it's gone from like 10 to 12 slots in the roster down to like 5 to 6. So it's dropped significantly off. And any sort of like kind of pest disease spot build is still played, but it's played in light, not in heavy anymore. So that's like the big shift that I kind of wanted to talk about. Not gonna lie, it feels like the build diversity is going down. It is going down, and the reason why it's going down is because people are super, super tanky, and there are 2 builds in the game that do a considerable amount of damage to people that are tanky right now that are commonly played. One of them is Spear. So Spear is really solid for doing damage, and the other one is Firestaff with Rapier, because you can get away with such low con. The other one that's Sleeper, a Musket, is okay. So these ones are okay. I'll do okay ones in yellow. You have, that's not a line. You have Musket, and then you have Bow. And both of those are okay in this meta, but I wouldn't say they're exceptional. Firestaff does a little bit more burst than Bow right now, but there's still animation cancels with Bow that allow you to do a bit more. And then Musket's just generally really good, but not a lot of people are good at it. What's Scorp? Scorp is Scorpion Sting. How many spears are typically slotted in a war? About 10 to 12. I think on this roster, how many do we have? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So this is 9 spears. It's gone up from this, it's gone down from this, but it's mostly gone up from this. These slots right here, they're mostly cut for spears. So it's about 10 to 12. The lowest I think I've seen in a recent war is 8. So I guess 8 to 12 would be conservative, but it's usually a little bit closer to this 12 side. And in general, Spear does really, really good because you have access to dodge spamming, so you can live burst very, very well. You have access to stone form. You can drop your con, unlike a lot of other builds. Like, you don't really need the grit from going 350 con, so you just do more damage. And in general, it has really, really high base damage compared to other weapons. So even while you're in heavy, you're able to hit people for pretty consistently, like 3k HP if you have your stuff put on them. Which is why Spear is really good at forcing people out, because you're hitting relatively hard and you're super, super tanky. Dodge spamming, but I was told that's why medium couldn't be buffed. Yeah. Spear is the joke. Because you have access to gaining dodges back every time you crit, and you have access to dodge stam reduction every time you hit someone. So as long as you're hitting someone and you're critting, so if they turn your back to you and you're chasing them, you can constantly just dodge trade with them. You'll take less damage, and you'll do more damage, and it's not possible to beat the spear with any other build because of that. Do you have a Firestaff stream for Wars? How much con would a Firestaff play in a new meta? I have EU ones that I haven't seen in a bit. I don't have NA ones really. I've heard the Firestaffs are running between 100 and 150 con right now. And they're doing 450 to 500 int. So it's like the reason why Firestaff is good is because you can go for that high of int and that low of con. And the only way that you can go for this is if you run Finisher, which also boosts your damage. So you're seeing a decrease in the amount of ice gauntlets that are being played. And then the other thing you're seeing from a point perspective that's a little bit different is you're seeing an uptick in the amount of flails that are being played and a decrease in the amount of ice gauntlets. So like, for example, like kind of giving away what we're doing, but not completely. Like this IGVG slot, we don't consider this to be like mandatory anymore. Sometimes we'll change that out for like a flail build. We'll change it out for another utility build. But like that slot in particular is the slot that typically gets quote unquote dogged, which we've already explained about. Like that's the slot that people will target the most because it's the build with the least amount of survivability, because you have to run, if you're a Void Gauntlet, you typically have to go Mag Gauntlets, and if you're going Mag Gauntlets, you're not going Void Darkplate, which means you're not very tanky. So you can just chase them and they don't have a charge ability to get out. They just go into Tomb and then they sit there, and then they get out of Tomb and then they sit there. So it's like really easy to just dogpile on that player. But that's like basically what I wanted to talk about, and like how that's shifting in terms of like how that actually works, like in terms of like in fort. Like it's pretty similar. Like it's just everyone's crashing basically onto the point. It's very point centric, but everyone's like on the point because they just don't die, and you need to be on the point if you want them to want to have uptick, you want to create pressure. So it's just a very point heavy meta. A lot of coin flipping, but going for the clump first isn't ideal, right? Because you just get counter crash and you typically lose because you have less cooldowns at that point. So it's like a weird circumstance where everyone's on the point playing the game of chicken of who wants to go first. So it's just all about just hitting the same target at the same time. Hear a lot of like target calls for specific people echoing that, and just in general, it's a macro heavy meta. I would say your individual skill matters a lot less in this meta than it did in other metas. But yeah, that's basically what's happened in terms of war and recently. But it's mostly just been a shift in terms of like how people have thought about things. Because if you are dogging people, you're creating a clump. That clump is baiting others, and if they hit you, then you're going to counter crash on them and they're going to die. I plot plenty of SNS Spear players. I can't tell individuals. I could tell individual skill doesn't matter. Pepe laugh. I mean, yeah, it's that build. I think matters a little bit more in terms of the macro understanding and your actual skill. It's just once you know that you can just win by dodge spamming, versus any build that's not a spear, it's like very very easy to play the class. And then the only thing you have to worry about at that point is the matchups, like your individual matchups. It's like it's weird too, because you either will go like tanky with a spear, or you need to go like pure glass cannon, otherwise the spear will not take damage. Like people are going like 400 to 500 int. Like you can't run more int with a Firestaff. Like that's like absurd, but it's what's being run. Oh, we got an hour. Oh, I didn't realize we had an hour. Well, that's cool. So we can chill for a bit. But yeah, I guess I could draw this out too in terms of like how it works on points. Like if we have A, B, and C, I'm pretty sure this is how the flags work. Obviously, get A and C mixed up a decent amount still. I know they flipping for it, but I always play B. Running Rapier with Firestaff only works if there are a lot of spears. Otherwise, IG. I think IG works too. It's just IG's greedier. Because if you're on IG, right, and you're in Tomb and your Tomb breaks, you're stuck in the same spot. So if people aren't able to retake the spot that you're standing in, you're just going to die. Versus if you're on Rapier, you're able to leave that spot that you're currently standing in. And then if you're playing that way, you're trying to live with the IG, you're probably using shower defensively. And if you're using shower defensively, you're not going to generate kills with shower. And if you're not generating kills with shower, why are you using ice shower? You should just go rapier. Or at least that's the mindset. miicrow have any other connections with companies on costs? Yeah, but it always works out the same no matter what company it is. It's a lot of like egoing. But I don't know. Ex Latinas, I know a decent amount of people. Chicken, I know a decent amount of people. And then cost at border control, I know a decent amount of people. But like, if you're trying to join a company and you're like newer, like you want to be targeting the companies like just got on the map, like Fed. Fed is actually historically like been around for a bit, like Arch, and then like House Grams. Well, House Grams actually a little bit more experience in this. They're just down bad on territory right now. But like the companies that are like newer to getting on the map are the easiest ones to join, and also the ones that haven't actually got on the map before but are attacking a lot. Yo, did the troll build make it mainstream? What do you mean troll PR build? I played the flow of EG stuff, so I took the SNS class and then changed it a bit. That was the interesting thing that we did on the other server today. I'll probably try for this war too. But idea is very simple. You normally have 500 con. Like, so you have like 28k HP with 500 con. Like if I lower this to 400 con, let me move this out of the way. Then I lose like 3k HP. And 3k HP is not that much at that scale. Like if we're gonna do like 28 over 25, like I'm losing 12% of my HP by dropping 100 con. Like it's not that big of a deal in my opinion. And then for that, we can be more aggressive. We can support people with more flail. Like you don't necessarily have to do it this way. Like you could just drop the focus too, but I like getting that 200 focus because that maximizes the duration of the vortex. And that's basically what I've been doing. I've basically just been doing this. Oh, SNS Rapier? No, SNS Rapier has not made it to a war setting yet. SNS Rapier requires people being stupid enough to hit you over and over, and war people don't typically hit you over and over as an SNS. If people are hitting you over and over, either they're stupid, or on the other hand, they're being really smart and they're trying to knock out your stamina while a clump crash is happening, which is what I like to do to Kenneth a lot. I like to do it versus a lot of SNSs, which is why you'll see me like mid-fight sometimes just start half-heaving and heaving attack like the other team's SNS, and I'll try to stun them and stuff. But by getting their stamina down, that decreases the amount of time they could shield during a crash. And there's nothing else I could do in that time that's like as helpful. Like if we're going in first, the other team's not going, right? So I might as well just break the other guy's stamina. And then if the other guy's stamina is broken, he's more likely to die, and then vice versa. When it's my turn, I'll start shielding. So other than that, other question I have is, should I stay green or swap factions? The smart thing to do is to apply to companies and not swap until you get it into a roster. If you get into a roster and you're not starting, you have to be really wary about swapping colors, because the faction lock is the thing that will minimize the amount of time that you can actually do wars. But usually the best way to join a company is you want to join a company that's attacking a lot. So, but then there's also like a weird circumstance with that, where if you join a company that's attacking a lot, but they're slotting every member that pushes, that means it's a good company to get VODs from, but it's not a company that's going to actually have players that are good enough to play with consistently, because most people that are in companies that are good are quote-unquote warloggers, as in they don't like to push unless they have to. So even with the new changes, which are a lot better, by the way, and I think it's like actually pretty fun, like people don't like to push unless they absolutely have to. So if you're in one of those companies that promises slots to everyone that pushes, then you'll just end up with people that are generally worse. Your ult would probably charge so fast too if you had Tondo. Be patient, companies will trial you out. Be active in your tickets. Yeah. I'm guessing people only use Rapier for utility with Firestaff. They use it mostly to escape. It's also used to reposition a bit too. It's mostly used as a repositioning and escape. Do I have the Rapier on here? No. But it increases your damage by every target that's bleeding, right? And everyone's running Spear, so there's a bunch of bleeds that are present right now. Because of Skewer, and it's not really passively on Spear, but it's mostly like, you know, going off from Skewer and SNS because people have extra perks there and to put like Keenly Jagged on it or something. And then that will just allow you to do more damage with the Firestaff. Unfortunately, it's kind of social slotting, so you probably want to attend all the events and be somewhat active in the Discord, or at least regularly at the start. Yeah, that's usually how it works. But the general targets are companies with lower amounts of territories for getting started, or the one that's usually easier, and what I typically do is you join a company that doesn't have territories, but they're trying to attack a lot. And those companies are a little bit harder to find usually. Sometimes they're invite only. Hopefully they're not invite only. And then from those, at the minimum, you get a VOD. At the best case scenario, you get a territory. And then you actually get to see the dynamics of the whole thing. The macro for wars in terms of like how you actually get territories and like how you actually attack things does not change that much. I was like kind of going into this, but then got sidetracked. Like, the first step that we typically go for is you try to put pressure on B, try to put pressure on A. After you get put pressure on A and put pressure on B, could I delete this super easily? Hopefully I can. No, I can't. But after you put pressure on A, put pressure on B, typically you'll get A. B, you'll get some tick on. Then you want to rotate part of your B to C. You get pressure on C, you get this to high tick, and then from there they have to give B. So it's like kind of a juggling act for the first 2 points, where you'd have to juggle the point tick for these points until you get to a point where you just have C left, and that's where the war gets like really interesting and kind of a lot harder. And that's where you get into dynamics where it depends on your kill squad, depends on your point team, depends on your quad groups. But typically, in terms of a point team right now, you are swinging heavily from side to side. I think I killed my epic pen. But you're trying to just crash where your quads are crashing like on and off. So you want to be going from like one side of the point to the other side of the point, crashing with your quads and getting out. Your quads play off of that. Your point team plays off of that. Your kill squad can play off of that, but they typically don't. You'll have groups from kill squad pushing in here, most of the army pushing in the mid, and then a few people kind of soft pressuring this weak side. There's basically no one that ends up on this far side on attack. You just end up on the point and a little bit below that. And that's basically it. For outside, inside phase, there's usually you waterfall it first of all. By waterfall, I mean you have the entire army break A gate, and then you go to B gate, and then you go to C gate, and then like once you break A gate, some people go the back gates as well. You break every single gate. You can break all the horns. It's not necessarily mandatory anymore. And then you stage your push. Usually there's like one group here, two groups here, two groups here. Two groups here, and then there's two that flex between like these gates for the most part and these gates for the most part. They can kind of create dynamics. Sometimes you have people from these gates go to B. Like, you're just trying to create a numerical advantage at some point, but end of the day, your entire goal once you get inside is basically just to push the point, unless you're a kill squad player, in which case it's to force healers out of your area and then push the point. But most of the fighting is on point. Healers are mostly ignored. Healers typically have low deaths but aren't able to heal enough, so I play an OCE, so not too many spears, so not a lot of passive procs if I play Rapier, but thank you for the help. Yeah, I mean, the thing with OCE is it's super, super clump-oriented. And what I've heard from OCE is there's a company that slotted 6 spears, and then they started winning. And the alarm bells went off in my DMs, and it was like, oh my god, this company is slotting 6 spears. How do we counter this? And it's like, you guys are only slotting 6 spears? Like, most of the meta right now has been between 10 and 12 spears for, like, the last, like, 2 or 3 months. So it's like, it's just hard to lose versus when you have Spear, is what it comes down to, because Spear has more pressure, and if you go second in a clump fight, you typically win, and clump fights aren't winning consistently right now. So, I know OC's meta is different, but it should eventually be similar to NA. Well, that being said, OC meta hasn't really changed a lot. It's usually just been super, super clump oriented, so yeah, I wouldn't completely count on that, but it's usually somewhat related. NA and EU meta tend to follow each other right now. NA is following EU. EU is ahead on the meta. EU has been ahead on the meta for like the last 2 or 3 months, and then before that, NA was ahead on the meta. XT we've run like none. I mean, yeah, but like I don't know. It just depends how much people like care and like want to try and stuff. Because the thing that that build like brings is it counters bruisers. It's just not intuitive. You can go thwarting counter, and the build completely counters bruisers because you have 42% extra damage versus bruisers because bruisers have grit. What is typical offhand weapon run with spear? Typically sword and shield. The other one that is run a little bit is rapier, because rapier is silly, which is why like when I went over that tier list, I was like, rapier is really, really good because it's being run with spear, being run with life staff, being run with fire staff, being run with bow, being run with musket. It's like it's run in so many builds that are meta right now because of the extra damage bonus that you just get passively by running a rapier, and it's really good for living. So thwarting counter and the spear perk probably need a nerf, not gonna lie. Yeah, the spear perk with thwarting counter itself just makes it really stupid because unearning precision, 20% increased damage against targets with active grit. You also run thwarting counter, and that's 22%, so you end up with 42% increased damage versus targets with active grit, which is why spear counters great axe. Like, you're versus a great axe, you're taking a 1v1 and you're just getting chonked. And even if it's like not a 1v1, say it's like a 2 or 3v1, like you're still generally winning that with spear because you could dodge trade out of it. When you get low on stam, you just pop a cyclone and you're good. Sweep is also sometimes run, javelin sometimes also run, but like something like this is like kind of what's being run. I don't run 300 con, bro. I'm meta poggers. Yeah, but the thing is like, say you don't run 300 con, right? The instant you pop stone form, you have grit. So it also hits healers harder, because when healers get scared when the spear is on them, they're going to pop stone form. So then they have grit. What's the ideal spear? Thwarting counter, rogue, pen, backstab. I think it's pen, backstab, thwarting counter, and what's the last perk? Play crits. Play crits is typically the last perk. Play crits is sometimes cut for rogue though, so yeah, that's an option. And then attunement's sometimes shuffled in there as well. There's a few good spears that are run, and depends on like what circumstance which is best.